Hello everyone! If you are new around here, my name is Kristin. I am an American in Europe and a fine art destination wedding and love story photographer. Now, if you've been following me for any amount of time, you know that I love books and I love travel. So that means travel memoirs are some of my favorite books to read, as I'm constantly getting inspiration and travel ideas from them. So I thought it would be a good idea for me to share with you my favorite travel memoirs that are based in and around Europe. And I will preface that this list is mainly written by expats who are living in and around Europe, and I just find that I can really relate to their perspectives, and I find a lot of comfort in sharing an experience with someone who's also seeing Europe both from an outsider's perspective, but also someone who's making it their own. So I just wanted to preface that, but let's dive into this list. Okay, first on the list is Travels Through the French Riviera by Virginia Johnson. Now, this one is both an artist's sketchbook and a travel guide because she has beautiful watercolor illustrations throughout this piece. So this is her memoir of her time spent in the French Riviera in the south of France, and she has wonderful recommendations in here for restaurants and family-owned cafes, antique markets, and smaller, lesser-known museums. Just really good ideas that a lot of just the locals might know about. So I absolutely love this book, and I think on my next trip to the Riviera, I'm just gonna carry it around with me because there's so many wonderful little gems in here that I'm excited to check out next time I'm in the French Riviera. So pick this one up if you have plans of going there, or if you just want a good armchair read to escape to the south of France. Next, we have Paris to the Moon by Adam Gopnik. Now, he is a writer for The New Yorker, so obviously then this is beautifully written, but he's an American and he ventures with his wife and young child to live in Paris for a few years, kind of following in the footsteps of Hemingway and Gertrude Stein and F. Scott Fitzgerald. He just goes to Paris for inspiration and to grow as a writer, but then he also has a very interesting perspective of what it's like just raising a child there and just the everyday struggles of being a foreigner in a different country and also just making it his home for his family. So this is a beautiful portrait of Paris. If you are a Francophile, this is a must read, but I really, really enjoyed this one, and pick it up if you love Paris as much as I do. Next up is Tish Oxenreider's At Home in the World. This one, I will be honest with you, I believe I bought it just because of the title, because the word home for me has always been a challenge because I've lived in a lot of different places. So I bought this book because I was curious to hear from another person the perspective of what it means to feel at home, not just in your physical house, but also anywhere that you are in the world, and what that can look like for different people. So this did not disappoint. It was wonderful. So it's Tish and her husband and her 3 kids, and they travel around the world for an entire year. And so it's a wonderful perspective on not only what it means to give up your comfort zone for a year, but also what that means to kids and how beneficial it is in their youth for them to travel. And I am not a mother yet, but I look forward to traveling with my kids. And if you are already a parent, this is a must read because it'll give you a new perspective, I think, on how to not only travel with kids, but also how beneficial it can actually be for them. Next, we have When in French by Lauren Collins. Now, she's another writer for The New Yorker. So this is also eloquently and honestly written. I love this book, but Lauren Collins is American and she marries a Frenchman. So this book is her memoir of learning French and also learning a whole new aspect of her husband. And I married a German, so for me, this book was an immediate must read because she has this wonderful perspective on both the joy and beauty of a cross-cultural marriage, but also the struggle of not being able to understand your in-laws and not speaking the same language as this new family that you married into. And also how, as you learn the language of your spouse, you actually learn a whole new side of them. So this was wonderful. It was really encouraging for me, but it's also a lovely picture of her life in France, and they also spend some time in Switzerland. So it's a really good one if you enjoy those areas and want to travel more there, or if you are learning another language, because it's a really fresh perspective on the language learning process. Next up, boy, do I love this one. Paris in Winter by David Coggins. This is another illustrated one. It is beautiful. It really reminds me of Matisse or the Fauvism, post-impressionism movements. So it's very colorful, just beautiful illustrations that feel like a very fresh perspective of the city of Paris. But what I really love about this one as well is it's his memoir of his family's travels to Paris in winter every year for New Year's. So it's a different perspective of Paris that you might normally see. And I love that he shares all the little traditions and rituals that they have when they go to Paris, the restaurants that they always go to, the people they always see, the streets and parks they always roam through. It's just a really neat portrait of the city at a time when it's, I think, lesser known, and at a time when tourism is way down as well, because the city just seems quieter. So this is a wonderful book. If you also love art books, this is just a must for you because it's one of my favorite books that I'm always flipping through for inspiration. Next up, we have Bella Tuscany by Frances Maze. Now, this is the same author that wrote Under the Tuscan Sun. You've probably seen that film with Diane Lane. I feel as though that's one that's just always on TV in the States when you flip channels. But this one follows the story, continues the story. So this one is more about her developing her home in Tuscany. She has a whole section just about how she plans her garden and decides what goes where, which as someone who enjoys gardening, I found that really interesting. But I especially love that she shares a lot of recipes in here that are all fresh Italian, garden to table sort of recipes that I am constantly going to this book actually for recipes. So it's really beautiful. If you love Tuscany, you will love this book. And if you love cooking as well, this is a good one to have on hand. Okay, next up is My Life in France by Julia Child. Now, Julia Child, I just think she's a darling human being, so I loved this book. But this is filled with beautiful photographs that her husband took throughout their time in France. So this is her memoir of what life was like there when they lived there, her language learning process, her time at Le Cordon Bleu, her transition into a career in cooking and in hosting a television series. There's just so much inspiration in here, and I think she's so brave and wonderful to take on this new venture, and really she was just making the best of the situation because her husband just got moved around for his job and she made the best of it and truly made a name for herself. So I loved this book. It's light, it's enjoyable, it's Julia Child. What else is there? So it's a good one. Next, I have Map of Another Town by M.F.K. Fisher. This is a beautiful little edition put out by Daunt Books Publishing in London. Daunt Books is a bookstore. They have several locations in London, but they also have a small publishing house. So this is one of the beautiful books that they've recently published. But this one is by M.F.K. Fisher, who was an American food writer. She was also friends with Julia Child. But this is her memoir of her time living in Aix-en-Provence in the south of France. So her take on cities that she lives in is she will create this map in her mind of her favorite places, favorite cafes, the places that she frequents, and sort of her version of how she sees a city. And I thought it was a brilliant way of making, especially a foreign city, feel more yours and feel more just personal to you. So I will definitely be making maps of my own favorite cities throughout Europe. But this is a lovely read if you love the south of France, and if you also love cuisine, because she has really interesting, of course, essays in here just about the food experience there as well. So this is a wonderful one. Next up, we have The London Scene by Virginia Woolf. Now, this one was also published by Daunt Books, and I love this little edition, and I picked this up when I was in London recently, and it is all of Virginia Woolf's essays on her life in London and her experience with the Bloomsbury Group, and just her love for the city and her perspective of the place she loves so much. I love Virginia Woolf. She's one of my favorite writers, and so this was kind of a must-buy when I was there. But it's really short. It's a quick read. I guess this is the only one so far that's been written by a local and a native, but it is a really lovely perspective, and it's a nice copy to just throw in my bag on a trip to London and enjoy her little essays. And last but not least, of course, is this big old book, 36 Hours, 125 Weekends in Europe. So this one is not a memoir, but it is, I think it's the only official travel book I have. I don't really have a lot of travel guide books, but this one is fantastic because it is 125 cities throughout Europe and what to do in 36 hours in those destinations. This is put out by the New York Times. I think they have ones for different regions throughout the world, and I do believe they have a new version of this. This was a wedding gift to Tim and I, because we were going to be moving to Europe, and so someone gave it to us as a way to say, here you go, here are 125 adventures you can go on. So this is just a really, really fun way to get inspiration and then get some good advice on how to make the best of a really short, quick weekend trip, which those are so easy to do in Europe. So if you are planning a longer term trip to Europe, or if you're going to be living here, this is a really great one to have on hand because you get lots of good ideas for quick weekend trips to lots of locations throughout Europe. Well, there you have it. Those are some of my favorite travel memoirs. I do have a lot more on my shelves, so perhaps in the future I will have to do a part 2 of this video. But for now, I hope those books give you some inspiration and ideas for your next read. But I thank you so much for watching, and I wish you all a wonderful day. Bye.